So I'm back out here with the Ford 1.6 liter EcoBoost. What a mess. Sorry I ain't been making videos lately. Got a lot going on with the pandemic and got all these kids at home. But I'm gonna jump right into this and we'll get started. First thing I'm gonna do, take that passenger tire off. Yeah. So the whole purpose of that is to pull all this plastic crap out of here, because I need to get in here and get better access to the engine so I can put it at top dead center. So all these little guys here are 7mm. So get your little baby wrench and I'll see you in about 16 hours. That can work too. 7mm, 7 bolts. Easy to remember. Dumb little clips here to take out. You just get yourself a flathead, work it under there. Should be able to pop up real easy. If I can do it with one hand, you can do it with two. There you go. Simple enough. You can just pull that out. There's only 4 of these. Now I'm already lying to you guys. There's 3 more of these 7mm right under here in the front bumper. So there was 10 of them. Now I don't want to get too detailed into this, but there's a whole bunch of these. You're gonna have to pull them out. And then there's this fender liner here, which is, chances are you're gonna break every single clip out of it. But they're these little white clips. They break very easily, and you're probably gonna have to buy new ones. So there's several of those. You just pull that off, and then you should be able to pull that right out. And then you got access to set the top dead center, and you get way better access to your belt and some other things. So we're gonna pass on that for right now. I just want to get all that stuff out of the way, so when it comes to it, we can just get right in there, get that bracket off, and then put that top dead center pin in the back of the block. But for now, we're going to get in here and we're gonna clean off the top of the block, get all that old head gasket material off of there. You can use a plastic scraper or something like that. You don't want to damage it. So nothing metal, because you're really gonna mess it up, because this is soft aluminum. And we are going to blow out all the holes in the block for the cylinder head bolts, because if you have water or oil down in them and you tighten them bolts down, that's going to put pressure and pressurize that water inside of the block. And you put pressure inside your block, you're going to crack it. So we're going to go ahead and scrape all that gasket material off and get them holes blown out. Yeah, you hear that, girl? We're going to blow your holes out. Now, something like this works perfect because that hole is big enough to fit over the cylinder head bolt hole. There's the 2 safety holes that go straight through. So you'd cover one of them up and then put it down over the cylinder head bolt hole. And when you blow in there, all the pressure is going to blow out of the backside here. Oh yeah. And then it's going to clean it out completely, and then you won't get dirty. So that works great. Okay, so we got our block cleaned off real nice. You want to make sure you get real good around these locator pins here. There's one here and there's one here. This is also a great time to check if they're actually in the block, because they might have got stuck in the head. I have both of mine there, nothing to worry about. Everything's all cleaned off, no gasket material left. You want to make sure everything's nice and dry. And then we're going to go ahead and get our gasket. As you can see, I'm dealing with the weather. I'm outside and I put a garbage bag over the block, which is probably where it belongs in the first place. But I don't want it to get wet, so I went ahead and covered that up. If you're outside, you might want to do the same, especially if it's raining. Quick update. Got the new camera, got the GoPro, got the car actually in the garage. Got the garage pretty cleaned up. Mid-video update. But yeah, still got the garbage bag on there. How's this view? That makes things very easy, right? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and take this wet garbage bag off of here and see what we got. Oh, danger, danger. Ooh, okay, we got all the water out. Throw that in the bucket. So everything is still dry. Awesome. Okay, so here we have 2 of the old head bolts, because we're going to replace them, right? Right? Yeah, we are. So the old ones, here's a trick. You cut the head off of the bolt, and then you cut in like where you'd put like a flathead screwdriver. Well, I guess you could even cut a cross on it and make it like a Phillips head. And then you would put the bolts in opposite corners. And then you have yourself 2 locating pins to drop the head down on. This is just a 4-cylinder head. It's not very big, but if you have like a very awkward application to where you can't fit the head in there, or you don't have these pins to hold the gasket in place, it helps, because once that head drops down on there, you can just screw them out of the top of the head, and then everything's located perfectly. Anyway, here's a new head gasket. What side is the top? What's the bottom? I don't know. Let's open it up. Okay, so here's the new head gasket. If you're wondering which side is which, see these larger openings here? They would go around there. What's the top? What's the bottom? Doesn't make a difference, but the top would be the side with the words on it. So you just want to make sure your surfaces are very clean. You want to make sure this is clean. If you're wondering what brand I'm using, yeah, so it's just a standard like multi-layered steel head gasket. Very simple. I'm gonna go ahead and put that on. Nothing special about doing that. Just drop it right on there. Make sure everything lines up. Ooh, tight fit. There we go. Yeah, that's on there for sure. Make sure you press it down real good. Okay, so make this easy. This right here, cylinder 1. We got our head gasket on. Cylinder 1. You want to get down here. Oh, I got the wheel back on because it moved the car. But right down in here, the crankshaft pulley. You want to turn that until piston 1 is about 20 millimeters or so from top dead center. Because when you put the head back on, you don't want there to be any kind of valve to piston contact, because you don't want to damage anything. Fair enough? Simple? You got it? Okay. Okay. Now we want to check our cylinder head before we put it on. Make sure all the bottom surfaces are clean. Make sure it's not messed up in any way, scratched, scarred, any sealing surface. You want to make sure it is okay. Then you want to figure out the correct orientation. So I know that these two larger ports fit over those dowel pins. So I'm gonna make sure that they're in the back when I put that on. All right, give me 1 second. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the head. Hopefully not drop it on the floor. Oh God. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so this is the correct way that it goes on. How does the back of my head look? Pretty good? Am I balding? Hopefully not. Okay, so that's fairly close. I'm gonna have to adjust it without a camera above my head. I still have this pin sticking in the side of the head. So what I need to do is slide this over top of this pin before I can correctly adjust it, because this hose is going to have to line up on the side here, and I will not be able to do that unless I put that pin in first. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Pick it up, hovering over the head gasket, not touching it. Got the pin lined up in there. I think we are good and lined up. Okay, just to double check, kind of try to push it back and forth. If it is not moving at all, it's just locked in there on them dowel pins. You just kind of want to look around the side, make sure all the surfaces make that good contact flush. Then we can go ahead and start cleaning off the top of this and getting it ready for the next step. All right, check it out. Brand new head bolts. You should have 10 of these bad boys. I'm gonna grab some old ones because we wanna, just to be sure, good idea, check them to the new bolts. They should be the same length, have the same head, the same thread pitch. If you put the threads together, they should fit right into each other. And it should be the same thickness. So, oh, and don't confuse them. So put the new one back in the old one and get that out of here. Now, per manufacturer specification, These should be coated in a very, very light film of oil, because if you have too much, like I stated before, you're gonna hydrolock your bolts and break something. So light coat of oil, bolt holes, empty, nothing in them, no fluids, no dirt, nothing. Check out your bolts. You wanna make sure all your threads are good. Make sure you have all 10 of them. You don't wanna put scarred up threads inside your block and tear your block up. If you got bad ones, send them back. Make sure they give you new ones. I have myself a very small cup of oil here. So what I'm gonna do is just dip the tip of the bolt in there and then just run the oil over the threads. Just light coat. I'm gonna do that to all of them and just kind of put them in there and hand tighten them. Now the very last bolt. Before you put this in, perfect time to double check what size it is. This is a T55. So I'm gonna make sure we oil that up. Lightly. Now we have all 10 of them in there. Okay, very important information here. Here is the bolt tightening sequence if you have the 1.5 or 1.6 liter EcoBoost engine. You start off at the top in the center with number 1. Below that would be number 2. To the right, number 3. And then you cross down to the bottom, number 4. And then from number 4 is back over here to number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and number 10. So that's your order if you have the 1.5 or 1.6 liter engine. Okay, so we have two tools here, both the same but also different. The smaller torque wrench is in inch pounds, and then the larger torque wrench is in foot pounds. We have two because when you're in such a small amount of foot pounds, this is not accurate. So you use this in inch pounds. It's the same, you can set them to the same number, but this will be more accurate in the lower values below, say like 15 foot pounds. So we're gonna start off with this, and let's check and see what our torque is for the first bolt. 44 inch pounds. So my setup for this is I have a 1/4 inch drive torque wrench. So I'm going to be using an adapter. It's a 1/4 inch to 3/8. And then I'm going to need an extension to be able to reach down in there. But I'm not going to want to use this long extension that I had. I'm going to use the shortest one I can get away with and still reach down in there, because this length actually alters the value of your torque depending on how long it is and where you hold your torque wrench. So I can probably get away with this without hitting anything, but I'd advise to go with the shortest length you can possibly use so you don't alter that torque value. And then make sure this is in good condition, because you do not want to strip out these heads on these cylinder head bolts because they are very expensive. Okay, so we got our torque wrench set. We're ready to go. Well, remember when I was under the vehicle taking the wheel off and the trim and everything, and we've been avoiding that ever since? Well, it's time to get back to that part. So now I have to get down here and take the wheel off. I'm not going to show you that. I'm just going to go ahead and take care of it. I'm going to show you what we're going to do after that, which is very crucial to the next step, tightening down all the head bolts. So here we are, passenger wheel well, got the wheel off. Got our light down here, and we have this. There's this brace right here around this axle, and then right behind the brace in here, it's really hard to see, there's a little bolt between that brace where you have to take off this bolt here, and then there's one on the other side, and I don't know if we'll be able to shift it around, but the brace connects on each side, one here at the bottom, one here at the top, so we might have to take the bolts off of that too, just to be able to get the brace out of the way to get that bolt out there, and I'll show you why. This is a timing kit for this specific engine. Well, not very specific, it works on several Ford, Mazda, and whatever engines, but it comes with all these neat little things. We got these pins here and we're gonna have to figure out which one we need to use. And where that bolt comes out, we're gonna slide this pin in. I think it's this one. Take that pin, after it gets braced off, put it in where that little bolt is between the brace there, and then we're gonna turn the crankshaft clockwise to set the timing at top dead center for cylinder 1, which is right underneath here. So it shouldn't move much because we had it like 20 millimeters away. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that brace off now and figure out the size of the bolts and everything and what pin I need to be using. So here is the axle brace that I took off. It's just the one bolt on the inside, the 2 bolts by the wheel, and they're all the same length. They are 13 millimeter, and then you have these 2 13 millimeter nuts you have to loosen up as well to take that apart to get everything out of there. So there's that. So here is the pin that I was telling you about. It is located right between these 2 points here where the brace goes on for the axle. So if you're looking for it, right between there. And you'll be able to tell what it is because of the way it's threaded. It doesn't look like anything else. It has a little rubber, I think it's rubber. Might be metal. Yeah, it has a little like sealing ring on the inside of it too. It might be nylon. Yeah, I think it's nylon. But yeah, it has that little ring on there, so don't lose that. Well, yeah, and I did use this 10 millimeter wrench to get that off. Okay, so I looked it up. It is not this pin in the kit. It is the shorter one here with the longer thread. It is part number 303-748. And that is your crankshaft positioning pin for timing. So we're gonna go ahead and take that, put it in the hole we took that out of, and then we're gonna rotate the crankshaft clockwise until it makes contact, and you're gonna do this very slowly. All right, so I got my pin in there. It's right between that space to the right side of the wire here. And I just put that in all the way, hand tight. And then I'm gonna take this tire iron. It's a 19 millimeter. I'm gonna put that on the crankshaft pulley bolt. And I'm just gonna slowly turn that clockwise. See it click? So I can even bring it back and click it in place there. So that is your top dead center. But you can leave that pin in there. So now we're just gonna leave it like that, and we're gonna go ahead and tighten everything down up top. All right, we're back up top now, ready to tighten up the cylinder head bolts. We got our torque wrench ready, set at 44 foot-pounds. Got my T55. All the bolts are in there pretty much hand tight, and we're starting off with our sequence. And the first bolt is number 1 in the rear center. So we're doing that to 44 foot-pounds. Sorry if my head's in the way. There we go. So, on to the next torque value. Let's see what we have here. 133 inch-pounds. Go ahead and get that set. And then number 10. Now we're switching over to foot-pounds. All right, here we go. Step 3, larger torque wrench, 26 foot-pounds, same sequence. 10. So that's step 3. Step 4 is actually to just do the same sequence. It has no torque spec, but it just says do a 90-degree turn. So there's tools for that, or you can just go by hand, 90-degree turn. So I'm just gonna do that. So what I did was just turn the torque wrench up as far as it would go, pretty much, to where when I'm doing that 90-degree turn, it shouldn't really click or anything. There we go. Step number 5, last step. Do that same thing all over again. No reason to watch me struggle doing that again, but just make sure you do that all over again, 90 degrees per bolt in the exact same sequence, and that's the last step for tightening down the cylinder head. All right, so we got that all squared away. One more thing with these little caps, they are actually valve shims, and you want to check them for scoring and damage, and there's a whole write-up on how they can be adjusted, and it'll help with any noise you might get from when these cam followers are moving. But you can look into that yourself if you want to figure out what you can do to adjust these and where they're supposed to be. Mine seem like they're all fine. I don't have any issues here, so I'm just going to go ahead and put them in there. Important step though is before we put these camshafts in, you want to make sure all of these little oil ways are clear. You can just blow that out with some air, make sure there's nothing in there, and then we can go ahead and get started with installing these camshafts. Another thing with these valve shims, let's see if we can see in here. You look inside there, where is it? There's actually a number. So on this one is 3.125. So that's 3 and 125 thousandths. It's a valve shim. So that's your adjustment for your valve here. So make sure they go back where you got them from, because that's very important. But here in my case, it doesn't really matter, because this exhaust camshaft, you can tell it's exhaust because it has this here, whatever that is for, don't know, but it's different. The other one will not have that notch right there, that lobe. So, and it's like triangular, it's not like a regular lobe, it's like a whole triangular lobe all the way around. So that's the easy way to tell that you have the exhaust camshaft. But in my case, my exhaust camshaft was conveniently dropped on the ground. I don't know, I come home from work one day, it's on the ground, there's just boxes all over the place knocked over, like one of the kids maybe got in the garage, messed some things up. So I got this new camshaft, and with a new camshaft, you will have different valve adjustment. So I set it in there on the height of the compression stroke. So this, let's see, get a better view right there. This notch here, this cutout, should be pretty parallel to the mating surface of the top of the head. So I got that set in there. It's going to be on the height of the compression stroke, and then I will put the intake camshaft in as well, and then I'm going to start putting those bearing caps back on here. I got them all set out right here. If you remember, E, exhaust, it's stamped on there, E5, E4. You start off from right to left, E5, E4, E3, E2, and then E1 is actually this complete unit here. Same thing with I1. So you would do I5 to I2, same story, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is that main piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and put both camshafts in, both with the lobes pointing up with that notch parallel. And I'm gonna tighten them all down and then start checking this cam to valve clearance. Another thing, soak all of this in oil. Put oil on everything. You can use oil, you can use assembly lube. I use oil. I just make sure I get it real good in there, because you don't want to put the camshaft in there dry and just start scraping around on these surfaces in here. Okay, so I did a couple things. I got both of the camshafts in there, both of cylinder 1 lobes pointing up, both of these kind of parallel, these cutouts here. And then I removed these 3 locating pins from here, here, and here. I'll show you why I did that in a second, but first we're gonna go down in here and we're gonna rotate the crankshaft 90 degrees counterclockwise, just to bring the pistons out of the way of the valves. So when we start turning these camshafts, the valves don't hit the pistons. Okay, guess what? This head had to come back out. There is pretty significant damage on the spark plug hole, the cylinder, and on the exhaust valve, and that's why it's very helpful to use dye penetrant testing when checking your head. But that's a whole nother video, a whole nother topic. Something you could look into if you want to avoid having to get a completely new head. So I just got this one from eBay, just came in today, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that one in and start off right where I left off. Try to explain things without having to really take that apart too much. Okay, so this is the new head that I got in the mail since I had to replace it. I have everything set up just the way it was before. I have the intake and exhaust of cylinder 1 set to the compression stroke. So they're both pointing up and inward. And our clearance for the intake, we're measuring right under here to these valve shims, these little caps, to the camshaft lobe. So sliding this under here, this is a 14 thousandths feeler gauge, just fits underneath there. So 14 thousandths is our limit. Anything over that is too big of a gap. So our limit for the intake is 10 to 14 thousandths. And then the limit for the exhaust is 14 to 18 thousandths. So if I go and take something that is 15 thousandths and try to put it on the intake, it should not fit, or else I have to make an adjustment. Here we go, 15 thousandths. So it stops right there. Crazy how a thousandth of an inch can make that much of a difference, but it does. So this would be good. What I would do is check this on both sides, intake and exhaust, and then I would check each cylinder, all 4 lobes. And you want to make sure these are tightened down. I didn't go over the spec for tightening these down yet, but I'm just giving you an example. I haven't actually tightened all these down except for this one here. These are those valve shims I was telling you about. I've showed it to you before, but I just want to show it to you again so you can see it a lot more clear. You can see on the inside of the caps, this one here is stamped 3.125. This one here is stamped 3.150. So you got a difference of 25 thousandths in thickness. And that'll close or lower that gap between your camshaft and your cam follower. So you want to measure that out, make sure it's all good, and if you need to switch them around, you can go ahead and do that, or if you need to order new ones, you can get them in a variety of sizes. But you shouldn't have to change anything here if you have all the original equipment. I had a damaged camshaft, so I went and bought a new camshaft. I would have had to change them all and measure the valve clearance for all of these, but since I bought this new head and the camshaft already came with it, and I've checked all these and they are all fine. I checked them when it first came in, when everything was tight. So given that this is all in the same position as it was, it'll be fine again. But if you have any new equipment, you need to make sure you measure every single valve clearance, and the tolerance is 4 thousandths of an inch. So if you're out 4 thousandths of an inch, you could have serious engine damage. You want to make sure you do this step correctly. All right, I hope you're ready because we're about to tighten down all of these camshaft bearing cap bolts, and it is a very strange sequence. So starting off, we're going to use our inch-pounds torque wrench, and we're going to start off at 62 inch-pounds. We're starting off on the inside intake, and this is our number 1. Okay, so moving over here to this section, there is the front bearing cap. You want to make sure the surface of that is very clean. And we're going to have 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, which are 17 through 20. And we're going to set our torque wrench to 89 inch-pounds. And you're going to want to replace this O-ring here. We also have the camshaft seals. They just fit right into here. It is very important because they have a lip on the inside here and a flat surface on this side. So you're going to want to oil these up, keep the lip on the inside facing towards the head, and you press them into place. Now I have some sealant that is going to be applied to this front bearing cap. It's going to go along the sealing surfaces here that go towards the outside of the head. And it is anaerobic gasket maker. Okay, so you want to really make sure you're using anaerobic sealant. It's a flange sealant. It can fill up to like 50 thousandths of a gap between mating surfaces, especially aluminum. It's very good for aluminum. So the point here is to seal the outside surface. So you would start off right up here in this corner, going very slow. It's very hard to work this material. Follow all the way down through here. And then right here would be where your camshaft seal goes, right here in this groove. So you would run it to that seal. I don't know why it's coming out so slow. This is awful. There we go. So the whole point of using an anaerobic sealant is because anaerobic means that it dries when there is a lack of oxygen. So when you smash this down with these 4 bolts and it really presses in there, there's going to be no oxygen in there because all the space is going to be filled, and that's when it dries. So when you tighten it down, if it comes out, you can just wipe it off because that'll never dry. So that is the point of using this sealant. And then we're going to move from the other side here where the camshaft seal goes. Going to go across over here on this outside edge. And then back over to the other camshaft seal. And then the same thing over here. got that air pocket out there. So that looks good to me. Maybe not to you, but it looks fine for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that on there. And you really want to press in on these camshaft seals while you're doing this so they don't fall out and they seat correctly. Try to just drop it straight down on there. You can see the sealant is actually coming right out of the edges there. Press down on that. And we're going to take our 4 bolts and put them in. The longer ones here go in the center, and then the shorter ones down here on the edges, of course. So they are 2 different sizes. Then we can go ahead and torque all 4 of these down to 89 inch-pounds. All right, so here is the order for bolts 17 through 20. Starting here with 17. There we go, on to stage 3 of the tightening sequence. Okay, so for step 3 here, I'm just gonna kind of explain it to you, because I know you probably don't wanna watch me tighten down a bunch of bolts again in the same sequence. So yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We're going in the same sequence. All of these bolts, 1 through 16, you tighten them an additional 45 degrees. And then for step 4, you move over here to 17 and 18, and you tighten them an additional 70 degrees. And then step 5, because these are shorter, they're only an additional 53 degrees. So that would be your last step. Step 5 is these 2. All right, so I made a couple adjustments here. I have this camshaft positioning tool lined up in here. I have both of the camshafts set to the compression stroke on cylinder 1. So they're both pointing inward. There is, here, let me take this off, I'll show you. There we go. There is slots cut into the end of the camshafts here. And you just slide this tool in, it comes with the timing kit. And there is magnetic rings that fit onto the end of the camshafts here. I marked those and removed them. And then there's another tool from the timing kit over here. It's very difficult to get down in here. But there's like a dash marked on here. I'll show you, much easier. I'll just pull it off. There's a line here and a circle on this side and an arrow pointing up. So what you want to do is line these sprockets up to where all these little grooves fit into them. And that is how you line the sprockets up to the camshafts and set your timing. But you want to remember to go down here, and we're going to turn our crankshaft clockwise 90 degrees. If you had it set back to lower the pistons to put the head on there. If not, you should already be set at top dead center. So that is not turning at all. And we can go ahead and put the, actually we'll put this back. And then we will tighten up these sprockets. Sorry, my camera's kind of crazy. Yeah, so we line that up and we will tighten up the sprockets in this position. I'll try to give you a clear shot just so you can see what they look like with all the different markings on them. These holes, and they're just good points to see how the sprockets sit. I don't know the significance of this, but there's a black dot here and a blue dot here. Don't know if yours will be like that, but that's how mine are. Okay, so I got these 2 bolts for the sprockets hand tight, and we're going to torque them down with a T55 Torx socket. And we're torquing it down to 15 foot-pounds. They actually make holder tools for these sprockets, so if you have them, by all means use them. This is not the correct way to do it, but I'm going to break the law and do it anyway. So 15 foot-pounds. Cool. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, we got these both tight. I just remembered there is on these splines here on the outside at 12 o'clock, there is a dash going straight up and then a circle that matches the dash and the circle on this timing tool. So that's a good way to indicate that they're in the right position. Anyway, I took the tensioner off for the timing belt, and it has these two tabs here. This one here will be pointing pretty much straight up, and the other one's kind of hidden down here in the back. So the whole point of me having these old vice grips is they just reach enough to where I can take these two tabs and kind of pinch them together, and then just twist this end here until these holes are in parallel, because we're going to need to stick a pin through there to hold everything together. Okay, so this is what our end result is going to look like. Both of them tabs lined up with I think that is a 7/64 Allen wrench, fit in there pretty good. But the reason I use that, so it's got like a tab on there, I can pull it out, because once we get that belt on there, we're going to pull it out, it's going to snap that tension back into place. So we can go ahead and put that in there now with this facing up. So this will be facing up. This tab here will be on top. So I got the timing belt tensioner hand tight. I got my torque wrench set at 18 foot-pounds with a T40 torque bit on the end. That out the way, thank God. I got big hands, so it's kind of difficult for me to get down in there. But the best way to put this belt on is to have it around the crankshaft. Starting off, pull up on it from the intake side. Get it really tight on the intake, and then bring it across to the exhaust sprocket. And then you're going to want to come down here and pull it tight to get it over that pulley. There we go. There it is on there. So we want to make sure that our crankshaft is still set at top dead center before we release that tension, because if it's not, we got a problem. Just to be sure, I'm going to pull that belt back off. Move it to top dead center if it's not already there. It was there. Never hurts to double check. So again, just come up from the exhaust side. Pull it real tight onto the intake sprocket. Tight over to the exhaust. You can see where the belt used to sit, so you want to line it up right where it used to be. Reach down here, bring it around. And we're in there. So just double check it, make sure it's good and lined up on here. You don't want that flying off, believe me. Then you can go ahead and pull out that little Allen wrench. And it is tight. Alright, now that we have that timing belt set, we can go ahead and remove our timing tools here. Put on these magnetic rings back where we marked them with these paint markers. And then we're going to remove the pin, the timing pin that we put in down here. And we're going to rotate the crankshaft clockwise 2 full rotations to make sure we don't have any contact with the pistons and the valves, anything like that. And I'm going to leave the spark plugs out while I do this, so I can not have compression while I'm trying to rotate that. And also, I'm going to take, once I take this out, I'm going to take those 3 little locating pins and I'm going to put them back in there. All right, I didn't want to bore you guys, so I just went ahead and took care of that stuff. Put these two back on. They pretty much just, you can slide them down in there and press them on by hand. If not, you can give them a little tap with this. Just make sure they're on here straight. Make sure they're right where you marked them, so they're as far on there as they need to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the 2 rotations just to show you guys everything in here working and no contact and how far it should be turned. Alright, so make sure you go clockwise. It is pretty hard to do this by hand. So that's about 180 degrees right there. And we are 1 full rotation. Another 180 degrees. And now that is 2 full rotations. As you can see, we are right back where we started with our marks. After reviewing that video myself, I think I'm going to straighten these up a little bit more. I'm just going to put a piece of flat rod right here and rotate it. It'll kind of just work them into where they need to be. And then I guess I'll start off with the spark plugs. Got a couple things to bolt on here. Put the exhaust on from there. That's just where I'm going to start, and a couple things here on the sides. Like I'd also like to bolt on like these hoses and sort is where I'll be starting once I start assembling. So go ahead and take care of that now. And I just wanted to bring this up so you don't forget, we took this timing pin out. Make sure you replace it with this so everything is sealed up. There is a little O-ring on here or a piece of metal. Make sure that is still on there in good condition and your threads are okay. It's just like an oil plug, man. It's gonna seal it up in there, so make sure it's in there good and tight. All right, moving back to the spark plugs. I put 3 of them in already, and just for general purpose, I'm gonna show you. I just put a little bit of aluminum anti-seize around the plugs. I didn't find a torque spec for the plugs, but as a general rule, I just kind of torque them down to 15 foot-pounds. Go ahead and put that in there. Try not to touch them with my fingers. I don't know. Real weird about spark plugs. Don't want to foul them up with any kind of like grease on my hands or something like that. So 15 foot-pounds should be fine. That's just generally what I do for spark plugs, especially I think these are 14mm threads. That's typically average spark plug size. So you could look into a torque spec for that size, but I'd say 15 is probably fine. Just double check. Okay. All right, so I got my timing pin bolt back in here. So now I have the bracket for the axle support, and that's just these 3 bolts here, and that's going back on here. And I need to show you that. You can refer back to the start of the video to see how I took that off. I'm actually pretty glad that I had to replace the head, because now I have this here so I can just kind of demonstrate everything for you instead of working in the actual engine, because you can't really see in the engine bay. But moving on to the exhaust, there is 9 studs that go in here, and there is a 2-piece gasket. If you are reusing your gasket, you notice like the squares that are imprinted on the back, they match the head, so make sure you put it on the way it came off, so that way it seals up correctly. Because when you tighten your exhaust manifold to your head, it kind of presses these gaskets in to make the seal. It crushes them. So you see it's a bit raised there, being forced in here. So just make sure you're aware of that if you're reusing your exhaust gaskets. But yeah, 9 studs here. Well, hopefully this is helpful for someone. I found the best way to start the exhaust gasket is to have the gasket slightly offset about 1/2 inch to the left or the right, and then you just kind of pinch it in place right here in the top center bolt, and then start this one first, because the exhaust kind of forms around this when all these don't really have open space around them. And then another thing was I started all the top ones first, and then you're kind of going in blind to put in the bottom ones, but they're just directly beneath the top bolt, so it really helps you locate them. Okay, so before I move on from the exhaust, all these studs back here are supposed to be torqued down to 15 foot-pounds and then re-torqued down to 15 foot-pounds again a second time, just to make sure there's no kind of pull on here that's causing it to not be torqued down all the way. So make sure you do it twice just to double check. And then moving on to the exhaust shield, we have 3 of these bolts, one here at the bottom, and here on the right side, which would be the passenger side of the vehicle, and then another one up here at the top. And then the 4th one is actually the stud that goes into this little thing here. So 3 the same, 1 is a stud that will end up on the top driver side when this is on there and turned around. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Can't really show you how it goes on because it is in the back of the engine. But the reason we're starting off with the exhaust now is so none of this is in the way. None of the stuff we have to put on here is in the way. It gives you a lot more room taking that off. So always good to start there when you can. Okay, I have just a little bit of advice for you when putting on the exhaust manifold shield. You're going to want to start on the passenger side. You can put one of the top bolts in just to get it started, but you're going to want to get the bottom bolt on the passenger side in, and then remove any of these to have it able to flex more. And then all the way at the bottom here on the driver's side, you're going to want to get that one in. So once you got the 2 bottom bolts in, you can kind of just flex this plate into position to get the top 2 in, because they're just so easy to access there, and the bottom 2 are really struggle, except for the one, especially the one at the very bottom here, because you got all this stuff in the way. And just make sure that you don't put these lines underneath the shield, because it tucks in behind them here. So just make sure you get the bottom 2 started first. It'll help you a lot. Definitely helped me. Before I forget to do it, I'm going to put these 2 covers on here. They are for the timing sprockets. There is like a crush gasket on there, so make sure that's on there and not in bad condition. There's also very fine threads, so you want to make sure everything's really clean before you put it on. I didn't find any torque spec for these, so I'm just going to put them on, you know, relatively tight. So I got everything cleared out over here. So I'm going to take that timing belt cover and put that on. There is 6 of these bolts. There's 4 right there, 5, 6, and then number 7. Ooh, secret. It's a long one, goes straight through the center there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on that. No torque specs for this. It's just a cover. I'm just gonna make sure I tighten it down very well. And remember, I believe this bolt goes behind the water pump pulley right here. So you can either take that pulley off or kind of work it behind there. I'm gonna go with the work it behind there method, because that's how it took it off. Okay, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we put on the timing belt cover, the intake goes on first. For the intake, we have these bolts over here. So this is how it'll go on the head. You'll have these 2 bolts on the top that go straight through the plastic. That's why they're so long. And they are 10mm bolts. And then there's the 4 on the bottom that you cannot access unless you put or still have other things off of the engine. So put the 2 on the top first, 4 on the bottom that are 8mm, and then we can put on this bracket. Now this bracket has 2 bolts on this side here, and then 2 bolts over here. those bolts, the two on the side are these two here. The longer one goes on the top, and then the two other ones are right here. Yeah, I know, I'm very organized. So, two here, two over here, longer one on the top. All right, so before I start doing any of that, I got my jack here. I'm jacking the engine up so I can free up some space to get around this intake manifold. But before I start working on the intake manifold, there is this little ground right here. It just goes into the bottom of the cylinder head right there, and there is a 13mm stud that holds that in place. So I'm going to do that before I do anything else. And this is exactly the reason why I'm doing that. See that opening there between the intake and the head itself? It is the perfect space to allow you to turn a wrench and make this really easy to do. But once I get that bolt on there, there's this little white sleeve here that's attached to the harness for the wiring, and that just slides over that stud. That's the whole point of it being there. It just holds this in place, keeps it out of the way of everything else. Okay, all right, so tightening down the intake manifold, I did the two bolts at the top. Those are 150 inch-pounds, and then the 4 bolts underneath, you can just go over here and look actually. So the 2 bolts at the top are 150 inch-pounds, and then all 4 of these at the bottom were 89 inch-pounds. Pretty much what I did was go top, bottom, and then each on the outside, and then I cycled through again just to retorque them down and make sure that I wasn't pulling the intake down in a certain way to give me a false reading. So that's how I did that. It's pretty irritating, but what really helped was the jack pushing the engine up to give me more space in here and still having that alternator out of the way, and then the bracket for the engine mount will go on next. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on now. Okay, now just as a reference here, like I said before, these 2 bolts will go in here, the top, and then this longer one will go in here on this side, and the shorter one on the bottom. Then we have our belt tensioner to put on, and that just goes on right here like this. And then we have 2 bolts that are the same length that just hold it in place there. And then since we've added this bracket, we can put on the timing belt cover, and this is actually one of the holes that bolts into. So that just kind of help you locate it. There's 3 more, I think, down at the bottom, and then the one here that is in the center. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put all that together. This stuff isn't really too hard to do. It's not very major, so I don't really know a way that I can show you how I'm doing it while I'm doing it, since it's so far down into the engine. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put that on. If you guys have any questions about this, feel free to ask me in the comments, and I'll gladly answer you or give you advice on how I did it. All right, so I got this bracket on here, and I did 2 bolts on each side, 66 foot-pounds, and all the nuts that are gonna go on here, and then these 2 bolts in here, I'm also gonna do them at 66 foot-pounds because they're all basically the same size, along with the 2 alternator bolts. I gotta push that back into place. These bolts in right here. I'm gonna do them at 66 foot-pounds. I'm not really seeing any specifications on the torque for anything but the bolts going into the block. So considering they're all the same size, I'm just going to do it all at 66 foot-pounds. And then once I put the timing cover on, I'll go over the specs for that. But I mean, it's not really too specific on how to put that back. But I think there is a stud on the back. Pretty much the stud on the back, I think, is 89 inch-pounds, and the rest is kind of whatever. And also this belt tensioner here, it's just the same size studs. So I'm just going to torque them down also to 66 foot-pounds because I cannot find specifications of these bolts anywhere. And this is another one of them things that's kind of down in there so you can't really see it. So putting on the belt tensioner, it just sits in straight across like that, directly underneath that bracket that I just put in. So these bolts are the same size, it looks like, so it don't matter which one goes where. So it looks like this is a 17mm socket that will fit on here to set the tension for the belt. So remember that for when the time comes, because I'm not going to tell you again. So I got the timing belt cover back on. Little tip for putting that on: it makes it a lot easier to manage this cover when this stud is not here in the way. So pop that stud out the engine mount, save yourself some time and some headache. Now I have this stud here, and it goes into the back of this cover right here on the back side of the engine. There's like a little strap that pulls up here, and then this bolts in through the hole that's attached to that strap right here on this back side. Also, while you're back here, we undid this little line, and it just has one bolt. It presses into the back head of the block. Take a look at the head over here. So it goes into the back of the head right here, which is one bolt on the top of it, and that bolt looks just like this. So just make sure you hook that line back up. Now if you watch the teardown, you know exactly what that is. That's my belt diagram. It is true to where it sits. We have the belt going around the alternator, behind the idler, around the AC compressor, underneath the crankshaft, up to the water pump, and back to the tensioner and the alternator. So if you can't figure that out, I don't know why you even decided to tear down an engine in the first place. Simple belt installation. Not really much I can show you here. Alright, I got the belt back on and the alternator in place. So I have the two alternator bolts. Well, one's actually a stud and a nut. So the bolt will actually go on the left side of the alternator, and then the stud you can put in, I think that is a quarter socket you could use on the end of that for the stud, and then you can put the nut on. I'm going to torque everything down to 66 foot-pounds, just like I've been doing with everything else over here. But yeah, that's how they go in, just like that. There shouldn't be any other reason for me to need to jack the engine up and down. So I went ahead and dropped the motor mount back on. It just slides straight down in there. Like, I'll just pick it up. Just lines up with the holes here on the body, and then there is 3 studs here. You want to make sure if you took this one off like I did, you want to make sure you tighten that back down. And then there is 2 of these bolts that go into the body here. And then I also have 3 of these nuts, and everything is 66 foot-pounds, what I've been doing. So shouldn't be too hard to get that back into position. The way I have the engine jacked up right now, it just slipped right on. I didn't even have to make any adjustments. But if yours doesn't line up properly, you can just either lower or raise the jack depending on how you have your engine, and it should just fit right on there with no struggle at all. Now that I have the engine mount back on, I can go ahead and put the coolant reservoir back in place. It just has 2 of these little slots here for these tabs, and that just slides down into position. But before I do that, I'm going to take this larger hose here and hook it to the bottom, and then once I slide that into place, I'll take these 2 top hoses and just kind of push them back on. Nothing too difficult here. It's pretty self-explanatory just looking at it. Alright, so moving along here, I am going to be working with this, the fuel pump drive housing. It just fits over the head right here. There is a oil feed line here, or oil feed hole, and that has a small O-ring around it. You just want to make sure that that O-ring is still good if you're not going to replace it, or replace it if that's your plan. We have these two locating dowels here. You want to make sure those are in good condition. And then I rotated the engine for this. If you notice, there's an extra lobe on this camshaft. It drives this fuel pump regulator. You can see it has a cap for it, just like all little valves on the head. So you want to make sure that's seated. And then we're going to be using our anaerobic gasket maker, and I'm just going to be starting here, going around. I'm going to circle all the bolt holes. I'm going to circle this, but I'm going to stay away from that oil hole, and then bring it on here, circle all the bolt holes, you know, go all the way around until I reach this end. And then I'm going to seat it down on here. You want to make sure that this is flat, so there's no lift on this lobe. You want to make sure that your cap is all the way pressed in, so you don't have any like bad contact. There should not be very much pressure on this when you put it on. So this is what I ended up with, and that's actually more than I would like to use, but my bottle is kind of messed up, so it comes out pretty quick now. So just remember, around that oil line there, that oil hole, just kind of keep your space away from it so there's room for that O-ring to seat in there properly and you don't really clog it up or anything. Alright, now tightening this down, there is a very strange write-up from Ford about this. It says you tighten them down in this sequence. Bolt number 1 would be the second one here. And then number 10 is right here. So it is actually a 4-step tightening sequence. So you would do step 1, 27 inch-pounds. Step 2, 80 inch-pounds. Step 3, 97 inch-pounds. Step 4 is bolts 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I don't know what the problem with number 3 is, but apparently that one's left out in step 4. So step 4 would be 124 inch-pounds. It looks like just don't do that to bolt 3 or 4. It's very strange. I don't know what the significance of that is, but that's what it says. So I don't really have any torque specs for this flange here for the vacuum pump. I'm just going to use the same torque steps for these bolts because they're the same size going into the same head. And I'm just going to start here and work my way like that. 1, 2, 3, and just do the same process of each step with the inch-pounds. And mine might look a little bit different than yours just because I have 2. This one's from the old head. I'm going to take the sensor off of here and move it over there. So nothing major there. I'm going to put the same anaerobic sealant on the underside of that before I tighten it all down. And I'm doing this before I put on the vacuum pump because I don't want to slide the flange down the paper gasket that goes onto that pump. I want to just press that gasket in place. And doing that, I will have to adjust the vacuum pump to fit in that slot in the cam. So if you look at it over here, this fits inside of that camshaft. So very important to make sure that lines up properly in there. I just want to show you this. If you look in the hole, I'll bring this over here, in this camshaft, it is off center. It is a little bit larger on one side, as well as this pump. The slot that fits in there is a little bit offset, so it only goes in one way. If I turn this around, it does not work. So make sure you line that up before you put that pump on there, or you're gonna not have fun. Now I just have a couple things I'd like to reconnect before I put on the vacuum pump. One of them being this hose here. It just slides on to this on the back of the head. And then this line here, where this slides on the stud coming out of the head right here. There is a 13mm bolt that goes onto the end of this. And then we have a similar connection underneath this black bracket here. Right here, there's a bolt that goes straight through this into the head. That is this strange looking bolt here. So we're gonna go ahead and put the camera down and put that in. Now looking at the head from the driver's side view, there is a black bracket, as you can see, that just bolts in here like this. The little hose we just put on would be right there, and the bracket bolts in just like that to where these two holes sit above the top of the head. Now, these are the two holes for the bracket I just showed you, and just beneath that is this small bolt here. And looking at the engine, there's this metal hose back here, this metal line. And there's a tab, it's kind of hard to see because of the light, there's a metal tab right there that just bolts onto the head. So I don't have any problem putting that on how this is. Apparently those dogs do. But if you don't want to put this on first and you want to get that out of the way, you can go ahead and do that. This is just the order I put it in because I got wrenches that'll fit right down in there that are ratcheting, so not a problem for me. So I made a pretty stupid mistake. This plate goes on the back of the head. The problem is, I didn't put it on. So the exhaust shield is in the way, but it's not a big deal. I just took out the top two bolts, loosened the third one right underneath here, left the very bottom one in, and then I'm just gonna work this plate behind the shield. That's why I do this stuff. I learned so you don't have to. You can just jump the learning curve and get right to building. So that's a mistake I made. Should have put that on a while ago, but you know, it's only 2 bolts for this, 3 bolts on that. All it cost me was time, so no big deal. All right, problem solved. Got that plate sitting back there. It is not bolted in though. There is these 2 bolts here. One of them goes through this bracket and into this right here, and then the other one is right here. So 1 bolt, 2 bolt, and make sure you bolt that line in place. All right, so the only thing I had to do to put the valve cover back on was remove the sensor from right here, and that cleared up enough space to where I can get to these bolts. And there is a sequence to tightening these like everything else, starting off with number 1. And then 13. So it should just be 13 bolts. And then let's see, what are our torque specs for these bolts? It is a 3-step process, starting at 44 inch-pounds. Step 2 is 80 inch-pounds, and step 3 is 89 inch-pounds. So that's all you have to do to put on the valve cover. Now that I have the valve cover all tightened up, I have these 2 sensors that I can put in. They are a mirror image of each other, so they only go on one way. See how this one would clip in on the left, this one clips in on the right. So there's only one way you can put them in. You can't really mess that up. They lock in there pretty good, and then they each have a real small bolt that just holds them in place. So not much there. Ooh, almost dropped that. And we also have this little plate with 3 bolts in it. It's got this little like rubber foam stuff on the bottom of it. That just slides over the top here and bolts down into place. It just kind of protects things from getting down into there. So I guess the whole point of this plate is if oil comes out of like the valve cover, it would catch that instead of letting it burn on the exhaust and potentially causing a fire. And this just blocks that off as well. Alright, so we have these little clips for the fuel injectors. They just slide on here like that. And then you take your fuel injector and stick it up there like that. Might be able to do it with one hand. But you'll hear it kind of click in when it goes in, and that just hooks all your injectors to the fuel rail. Then you just take your whole assembly, line it up with the openings in the head. You should just be able to drop it right down in there for the most part. Kind of hard to do with one hand. There we go. And then when you screw 4 bolts in to here, it should lock it all in place. I don't have any torque settings on that, but when they're tight, you'll know it. And then this rail just hooks back into here when you're done, because it kind of covers that bolt, so you have to do that last. Once you get all that in place, there's this stupid little foam piece that just kind of sits on here. Real stupid like. Kind of blocks this off the last fuel injector. But that's how it's made. And then you have this cover here that goes on top of that. And all the bolts are locked in on here. And then this one piece in the back slides down over the stud right here. And then this bolts down on top of that. And once you get that bolted down, this slides over that. But just how it sits here with this harness, this very end connector will go on the very first injector, and so on. Well guys, it looks like I've made yet another minor mistake. This fuel line here actually goes underneath this. So what I did was I just took out the sensor here, and then I fished the line from under here through that out here and tightened it up here. And once you're done with that, there's another one of these stupid little foam things that just kind of fit over it. There we go, there we go. Nice and ugly. Okay, so I have this little plate. It's pretty much just a holder for like wires or whatever. Bolting it into the head, looking at it from the driver's side, it would just go on right there. And once you get that little plate on there, this blue sensor connector slides right on to the adapter that is hooked into that plate. So it just kind of holds it in place, keeps it from getting burnt up, which is also why this is wrapped in this foil heat protective stuff. And that sensor with the orange just plugs in right here. You got another one in the front, same sensor, just a different side of the engine, plugs in right here. Come on, there we go, that's what you want, that click sound. And now we can hook up the vacuum pump. Alright, so we have our vacuum pump. Very simple to put this on. You just make sure you have your black paper gasket on. And then there's this pin here. It kind of has an offset to it like I talked about earlier. You just want to line that up to fit the opening and the end of the intake camshaft. You can kind of just wiggle it into place. And then it should line up pretty easily. And then you just put 3 studs in here. One on the left, one on the right, and then one on the bottom. And once you have them on, you can take this black bracket here, slide it over the studs, and there should be nuts on them to where you can just bolt that into place. Alright, now that our vacuum pump is on, you can tighten that little black bracket on here. There's 2 nuts. It just slides over these studs, and there's 2 nuts on there. You just tighten that bracket down with. This little metal plate in the back, we put that blue clip on. I left it loose for a reason, because you can slide it over the 3rd stud to the vacuum pump. There's a nut you can put on that, and then you just tighten it up in the back there with the bolt in the back, and that'll be all tight. And then moving on from there, we can go ahead and put on our coil packs and start hooking up all these extra sensors. So all the coil packs seat into the top of the engine just like this. They each have 2 bolts. They all face pointing this way. And to know they're seated properly, you should be able to pull up on them pretty good with 2 fingers and they'll not want to come out. It takes a pretty good amount of force to remove it from that spark plug. You could put a dielectric grease inside of them if you like. That is up to you. But yeah, they all have 2 bolts each. And I do not have a torque spec for these, so just pretty much hand tight. You don't want to break them. Mine may look different than yours because mine are brand new. My other one's burnt in a fire. If you want me to explain that, leave a comment and I will post a video explaining why my coil pack's burnt in a fire. Once you get all the coil packs in, there's this electrical harness here. There's a clip here that's going to go on a hose, and it just crosses over and everything pretty much just falls into place. Starting off with the coil packs from left to right. They all just kind of line up where they need to go. There's here for your fuel injectors. There's push pins that pop back in to this cover. There's this plug with the orange. It goes right in here on the top. And then this hose goes right on there. We have this one down here. Fits over the sensor for the camshaft. There's another one back over here. Fits on there. Maybe. And this one here. Another one with orange. There we go. It's that way. No, it doesn't. Which way does that go? Man, I'm losing it. Alright, I was right. That one does go on the back of the engine there. So, now we have this line, this vacuum line coming all the way around here, coming from the back, straight to the vacuum pump. We have this line here. It's going to go on the intake, the air intake. And then we can hook up our reservoir for the brake fluid. Let's actually have that right over here. This just presses into place. We'll do that later on. What else do we have? I can go ahead and start putting coolant back in the engine. Along with, I took the battery out because I have to replace my battery. So I'm going to put the new battery in. And I almost forgot, there's this little hole right here. You just drop your dipstick right in there. I'm going to go ahead and change the oil while I'm at it too. Okay, I'm an idiot. I think I got it all figured out now. Well, first of all, this hose goes on here. I don't know if I mentioned that before. I just kind of set it there. But there's another hose here. This one clips here. And then there's a push pin on the side. You push it on the side of this cover. It wraps around the back. And it connects to your intake. It's just a push-on connector. There's a little fitting back here. It just pushes right onto that. This plugs into here. This hose here just plugs right into there. And of course this fits onto here. Tighten it down over here. There is 2 spots here. This drops over a stud, and then there's a nut that goes on top of here, and then this one here is another one of these engine cover mounts. And then down here at the bottom, it just slips on. There's, okay, sorry about that, the camera died. What I was saying is this intake just slips over this tube down here, and there's just one band clamp to tighten down there, and that should be it. You're pretty much set from there on out. Just a couple things, just covers on the battery, I don't know if I mentioned this, I took this pin, I had it on a stud back here, I moved it up here because it was in the way of the intake. I think that's actually where it goes. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just refill your fluids, your brake fluid. This was just kind of hanging here because when I put that cover back over here, this bolts up to that. So it's just kind of chilling right now. And then I have the engine cover. I'm still gonna put that on. I have no idea where I put that. Add your coolant, definitely change your oil. I'm in the middle of doing that right now. And that's pretty much it. Other than, like, you know, putting the wipers back on, there's a plastic cover to put down in there, and then your wheel, this trim piece here, and then you should be good to go. We'll start it up. All right, we're in this filthy, dirty, nasty car. This is the scariest part. Whew. Hey, that's annoying. Yeah, you want to make sure you turn everything off. I'm getting an engine low coolant. That's normal, because that was the problem when I started working on this. It's throwing all the old codes. Yeah, you want to make sure there's no load on anything. So turn your air off, turn everything off. You might want to turn the key. You can hear the fuel pump going. You might want to turn the key on and off a couple times just to pressurize that fuel system. I should turn the headlights off. You want zero load on the battery because your car is going to learn how to idle with zero load, and then you're going to run it with the air conditioner on. So you run it for a minute or two, zero load, and then run it another few minutes with everything on, like the radio, air conditioner, and it just like relearns the idle process on how to be the most efficient. And then what you're supposed to do is drive it for 10 miles right after that. But we'll see how this goes. I'm going to set this behind the car because I have a feeling this might be cool. Okay, everything's fine. I just got really scared when I turned that on and heard that clicking. But I'm pretty sure it was the high pressure fuel pump, the way that that lobe hits on that when it hasn't been run and don't have pressure. So everything should be good now. The coolant kind of dropped down and I added more to it. Everything seems fine. Smoked a little bit. I think it was just excess coolant burning off of the exhaust. So should be good. I got it up to temperature, ran it with the AC on, and when it like checked its idle and it really kind of reset, and it's running good. It quieted down a lot. Don't see the smoke coming out of the exhaust like it was before I done this. Just a little bit of fluid because coolant, and I was running the AC, I guess. But other than that, everything's perfect. System check, you can probably not see, like no messages, no check engine light, or no new code. I never reset the light, but there's no new codes on there. Awesome. Best feeling in the world. Check it out. Check it out. No more car in my garage. I actually got that done like 2 weeks ago. So I put like 500 miles on it since then. Been driving it to work or whatever. But yeah, all good. No check engine light, no oil leaks, no weird sounds. It's actually even more quiet than it was before. But hey, if you guys use this video to put a new head gasket on your engine, or if you use it to help assist you rebuilding a 1.6 liter, let me know, because I think it's very cool when someone uses my video to help themselves out. But thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.